much.
Recording has
Thank you
started.
very much. Good morning. Welcome. I'm Sandy McBrayer with the Children's Initiative and chair of the Before and After School Advisory with the Department of Education and the governor and the legislature. So I welcome you to our meeting this morning. I'd actually like to do introductions of our members. If you can state your name, where you're from, and if you do remember what seat you're in. It's also, I believe, on your name tag if you need to quickly peek. So Chris, I'm going to start at your end.
Hello, everyone. Chris Meza from the Napa County Office of Education, representing urban schools.
You.
Tony Brown from the Los Angeles area, representing small school elementaries.
Julie Brooks, also from Los Angeles area, representing large elementaries.
Brad Lupian, San Diego, Los Angeles, and Imperial Valley areas, representing large middle schools.
Thank you.
Cindy Haas. I am from Tehama County Department of Education in Red Bluff, California, and I'm representing rural schools.
Jennifer Cisneros from Santa Ana Unified School District, representing high schools.
Good morning, Diane Ortiz, Youth Alliance, San Benito and Santa Clara County, representing small middle schools.
Thank you very much. We do have a quorum for the record as we move forward. I want to review the materials in your packets. For those members in the audience here today, there are agendas in the back. There are also speaker slips. If you'd like to address the audience, you could fill out a speaker slip for us. On the left of your packet is the agenda for today, as well as the meeting minutes from the last meeting in January. And there's also some notepad paper in there for you to take notes. On the right of your packet is the ELOP Bridge and Boost, and that will be talked about during the department's presentation. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to review the minutes. Please note if there's any corrections, if we captured what you said eloquently, if you have any questions about anything that's written, we'll take a moment for that. And I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes and a second.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Diane.
Second.
I have a second from Julie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The minutes passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, I have a very short legislative update. I just wanted to remind, we talked about some of these bills last time, but some of these bills are still moving through the process. And as you know, the legislative session is a process. There are amendments, there are changes, bills quickly sometimes get gutted and redirected, but I'm going to call attention to two bills, and we'll have a presentation on the third one. But the first is AB 2007, and we've talked about this, and this is identifying information of youth. This was amended on March 17th. It clarified and strengthened parental consent requirements and further restricted non-school youth programs and how they may use, share, or market youth identifying information. So it is limiting and making sure that parents have control and knowledge if a youth image is being used in any material, whether it's a video, whether it's a publication, whether it's a newsletter. It's very similar to the school restrictions that are in the traditional school or regular school settings. This did pass the Privacy and Consumer Protection Committee unanimously, and it was sent to the judiciary, and that is due to the civil liberty and enforcement provisions in that bill. So it is moving through, but it is applying directly to non-school youth programs, which would be some of our expanded learning programs run by community-based organizations. The second bill is actually mirroring what's already in ACEs and assets, and that is requiring prioritization for unduplicated pupils. And many of you know those are English language learners eligible for free and priced meals or foster youth. So this passed the Assembly Education Committee. It's AB 2107, Expanded Learning Opportunities Programs Offering Access for ELLP. So it's making sure that we have priority access for our special populations. It passed the committee Education Line 0. It was unanimous in the Assembly at 64-0, and it is now in the Senate for referral. So it's going to allow the same prioritization that's in ACES and assets for ELLP. The last update I have is the federal budget. Many of you have been following the new skinny budget that was proposed. It includes significant changes to 21st century funding. It eliminates dedicated funding for 21st century and instead folds it into a $2 billion block dedicated called Make Education Great Again. And it's a block funding and it includes 16 other programs. So they're, instead of all of them having their designated funding, they're all into one block. It also reduces the overall funding from all 16. If you gathered them all together, it equals 6.5. Well, this is actually 6.5 billion. Let me clarify. This actually reduces it to 2 billion for all 16 in a block grant. This would obviously, if enacted, would reduce funding for after school and summer programs. It also does not guarantee funding for expanded learning programs under 21st century. And there is more state flexibility, but there's less federal protection for 21st century. Again, this is only a proposal. It's the first blush of the skinny bill. It is not a final decision. Congress obviously ultimately decides, and a similar proposal was rejected last year, but it is incumbent on all of us. If you remember, we rallied the troops. We have more time this year. Last year, this didn't come out until pretty late and caught everyone unaware, but this year we actually have time. So it's important that we talk to our school districts, our partners, our parents, that we reach out to our legislative and congressional leaders to say, this isn't good for kids. This isn't in the best interest of families. How do we protect this dedicated funding? Any questions on those three, the two bills and the skinny bill? And it's skinny. Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead, Tony.
can you tell me the letters for the first one?
So AB 2007. And then the second one was AB 2107. And we're going to be talking about AB 2430 with the Partnership for Children later on the agenda.
Sandy, can you educate me and maybe members that are people that are listening, like timeline after the skinny budget, next phase, when we need to do the work to advocate?
Now, so proposals are going in now with the current administration, and they need to hear from as many people as possible. They'll continue to modify the budget. We'll look again in June, but it's a process that they're going to go through. I can bring all the actual kind of cutoff dates at the next meeting. I don't have those with me, but it's incumbent that we talk now because last time we had such a strong voice, but so late. They have opportunity to make modifications now. And so we want to hear from as many people as possible as soon as possible.
So just to clarify, the public that's interested in this should be making phone calls and doing advocacy now in late April through May with the idea that we'll hear a next word on this in June.
Yes. And they need to do more than just make calls. They need to write letters. They need to make sure they need to invite their congressional leaders to their programs. I mean, we're doing that right now in San Diego, inviting our congressional leaders to come to some assets and 21st century programs so they can see the difference it makes. It's kind of a shotgun approach, calls, letters, site visits, going to see them in person, bringing youth and parents to talk about the value of these programs and what it's meant to them for the protection of their kids, for the education of their kids, and for their economic stability, being able to work those hours. So it's really not just our school partners, but the larger community partners, how this makes a difference, our CBOs, employing staff, all those things.
And one more question on this, or clarifying point. This is not a California thing, so we should be encouraging our colleagues in other states, and when we have family, friends in other states, that this is going to be even a bigger hit for those other states.
It's all across the country. And, just when we do a site visit with our congressional leaders, not only do we show them the program, but we show them how many people are employed in the program. We actually have data sheets for them to show what the economic interest is. If parents are working full time, what does that mean? So it's not just, this is a great program and this youth is happy, but just the impact of their community and how many people are employed by those programs within their congressional district. And that always causes them to pause. They're like, wait a minute, there's like 600 people. Whoa, wait, for my whole district. So it really helps them realize that those are voting taxpayers who potentially could be losing their job.
Thank you for clarifying.
Tony?
Sorry, AB 2107. That's
Yeah.
what we were just looking.
Correct. And that's the unduplicated pupils for ELOP. So it's mirroring what we're doing in ACES and assets and putting it over into ELOP also. Any other questions legislatively or federal government? Okay, thank you. We're going to continue to move through the agenda, and I believe we have Josh with us to do an update for the Expanded Learning Division announcements and updates. Josh?
Great. Thank you, Chair Sandy McBrayer, and good morning, committee members. Good to be with you today. Just have a few updates regarding ACES and 21st Century, some reductions, some information on unspent funds, and so on and so forth. I do want to note we have about 98 people looking at this via live stream. I did see a hand go up, but I do want to note that we will take public comment at the end of the meeting for those that are listening in. The first update is on 21st Century Community Learning Centers, the supplemental grant. I want to highlight that the grant award notifications were sent out to grantees on March 19th, 2026. And a reminder that the performance period is July 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2026. For moving on to the after-school education and safety grant updates, the ACES Universal 2025-26 Round 2 Final Intent to Award was released to the field on April 10th, 2026. There were a total of 370 sites that were funded, including 261 new sites. Now, we understand that the performance period for this ends June 30th, 2026. So it may be hard for all of them to spend all of the funds. However, the important thing is that there are 261 brand new sites, which means they are not now part of ACES moving forward. And they will continue to get their grant every 3 years, renewing their grants, and they're in ACES now. And that was the big intent of doing a round 2, 2025-26 ACES, was to get more grantees and more sites included. Also, as you see, the round 2, we had 145 applications, over $112 million in requests, and we had $45 million available. So you can see how competitive it was, especially for a round 2 RFA for that. So that's for ACES 25-26 round 2. ACES Universal RFA 2026-27. We have a total of 100 applications for 584 school sites and over $92 million in requests. Now, some of those 584 school sites were probably funded in round 2 because at the time of the due date of this application, we still had not put out the final intent to award. So those that were funded in round 2 and applied in the ACES Universal RFA 26-27 will not be funded again because they already got funded in round 2. We are in the process of reviewing the applications. We have identified several applications for disqualification. We are drafting the memo and drafting letters to send to our division director, Michael Funk, to be reviewed and signed off on. At the same time, the team is working behind the scenes to work on the intent to award packet. So we're doing a parallel process with DQs, intent to awards, and hopefully the intent to award will be out in a few weeks. Once it leaves our division, it needs to go to our branch for review and approval. So those are the updates on 21st Century and ACES. And
Josh,
I
if
will
you could
see if
pause
anyone has any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. We do have questions. Brad, do you want to start?
Hey, Josh, thanks for the information. When you referenced of the 100 applications for the RFA 26-27, that some number of those are ineligible because they're part of the 145 that got, or the round 2 that got funded. Are you talking 1, 2, 3, 4? Or are you talking dozens of those, because we heard of a lot of people that applied for both. We encourage people to apply for both. Of the 100, do you have a rough estimate on how many are not part of that application because they got funded in round two?
Good question, Brett. I don't have the exact information now. And it would probably be better to look at the number of sites that got funded. And we can definitely provide that the next time around. Because again, there were 374 sites funded in round two and 261 were new. So we can easily find out of the 584 school sites that applied, how many got funded in round two. So we can give you that information.
Thank you.
I don't have it on me.
Josh, is the only reason for disqualification because they had applied for round two, or were there other reasons for disqualification?
Yeah, good question, Sandy. If they got funded in round two, it's not that it's not that they're being disqualified, and we won't send them a letter because they're not technically a DQ. They already got funded. The reasons for DQ that we're finding are several. It's not signing the certified assurances, only submitting a cover page. We had a few non-LEAs that applied that are not technically eligible. We have a few that, once again, they start their application in Assist, they print the forms, and they don't submit their application in Assist. So technically we have no record of it. And so there are a variety of reasons for disqualifications.
I just wanted to clarify, because Brad, I think you were assuming that disqualified also included those who applied for round two, and it does not. So it really is not following the correct instructions and guidelines and submitting a approved full proposal for disqualification. Sorry,
Yeah,
Julie. You have a
yeah,
question?
and I do want to highlight, again, if they were funded in round two and applied in 26-27, they're just not eligible because they already got funded. Now, we had lots of questions coming in because we hadn't put out the final intent to award. Hey, should we apply for 26-27? Because we don't know. And of course, we said yes, because that was the safest thing to do. But if they got funded in round two and they applied in 26-27, we're not going to refund them because they're already technically funded. So that's the answer to that question.
I just wanted to clarify it for the audience that it was two different words that we needed to use. Sorry, Julie.
Josh, thanks so much for this information. Could you give us a little insight into those round two funded sites and their UPP rates and percentages?
You want to clarify UPP for the audience, please?
Yes, sure. Unduplicated pupil count, if you could give us a sense of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, good question. However, for ACES, we do not collect that information. UPP is something specifically identified for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. And so when they apply for ACES, they're just applying based on all the information that's on the application. And then for ACES, we fund by the highest FRPM, and we go down to the lowest FRPM based on the funding that is available. So that is information that we do not have for ACES.
Can you, then I'll clarify. Can you give a sense of the FRPM?
I will see if Emily or Kindred, they're in the room, if they have that. And if they don't have it at the tip of their hands, I'm sure they can find it as we're having this meeting. Emily, Kindred, anything on that?
Yeah, Josh, I've got it. This is Emily. I'm one of the supervisors. So we did fund a school with 100% FRPM and went all the way down to 46.58 FRPM.
Is that for FY 25-26, correct?
Round two, yep.
And was there a concentration in any particular kind of range? Can you tell?
I don't have that information.
Okay, thank you.
But if we remember, in round one, we funded all the way down to 0% FRPM. And the reason why we did round two is because we had a lot of funds left over due to the excessive reductions that we had, because reductions had not been done in several years.
Yes, of course. Jennifer.
Hi, Josh. Good morning. I just had a question for 26, 27. How much available funding is there?
We're still looking at that, but we know that based on what we'll talk about next, reductions, whatever you see for the ACES reductions, that's what will be available. Plus, we take into consideration closed schools and school site substitutions that we've approved. So that's on the next slide. And it looks like it's a little over $11 million, and then plus closed schools. I do want to highlight, I mentioned FRPM, but to be so everyone understands what that means, FRPM is free and reduced price meal percentage, and that is what we use for ACES to give out awards.
Yes, sorry, Brad.
Sorry for all the questions, Josh, but you told me to ask them. So not these particular ones, but you said keep my questions coming. So can you walk us through, if you got a round 2 ACES grant and you've got two major requirements, one attendance by June 30th and one expenditures by June 30th, the folks that got these wonderful middle of the year grants, I think some of them are saying like, well, what do I have to do by June 30th to not get this grant and then lose some portion of it? Can you walk through the timeline for expenditures and attendance for those folks that got round 2?
I'll start and then I'll pass it to Emily or Kindred if I miss anything. Again, when we did round 2, we knew there was going to be a short window to expend these funds. So the round 1 ACES and the round 2 ACES have the exact same performance period. The difference is round 2 was the final intent was announced April 10th, right? The next step is they need to receive their grant award notification. The last day to expend those funds is June 30th, 2026. However, they will get a brand new award starting on July 1st, 2026 for the exact same amount of funding. And so we understand that many of those that were funded in round 2, they may have a difficult time expending those funds. And that's why we highlighted that in the e-blast that was sent to the field. In addition, we also highlighted the reduction factor because people were asking, what about reductions? Well, for those 261 brand new sites, they will not have to worry about reductions in calendar year 2026. And why is that? Because they need a full calendar year of attendance in order for us to review that. And so we will not be looking at those 261 new sites for a reduction until they have a full calendar year of attendance, which would be after 2027. I will pause there for a quick second to see if Emily or Kindred wants to add anything, more context or anything that I may have missed.
No, Josh, I think you've got it. There are no ramifications for any unspent funds. So any unexpended funds are just going to revert back to the state. And yes, I agree with the new grantees and new sites that we will not be assessing a grant reduction for calendar year 2026. And we'll look at their attendance at the end of calendar year 2027.
Brad? Any other questions? Thanks, Josh.
Okay, I'm gonna move the slide and pass it to Emily or Kindred to talk about the reductions, the process, and just kind of how it worked out and the amounts.
Okay, the total amount of reductions that we calculated for our ACES 21st Century Elementary and Middle School and Assets funded sites totaled a little above 27 million. So it's $27,135,629.29. And then broken down into our different programs, our ACES reduction was a little bit over 11 million. Our 21st Century reductions was a little bit over 8.7 million. And our assets reduction was a little bit above 6.9 million.
Any questions on reductions?
Go ahead, Julie.
You had mentioned school closures, and we are seeing trends of reconsolidation in a lot of districts right now. Do you have a a sense of how that is impacting these numbers? How many of this is school closures and reconsolidations?
Well, reductions are just the reductions. This amount does not take into account school closures. That's why when a previous question asked how much is available for ACES, we know that the ACES RFA is based on the reductions, but it also considers school closures and school site substitutions that we process. And so we'll have that amount in the near future, but we don't have it now.
Great, thanks so much.
Other questions? Sorry, we have Diane, question?
Just curious about the assets reductions. Did you see any trends or anything related to that?
No trends to share at the moment.
And I do want to just note our director he's on the live stream, and so I'm going to give him an opportunity to say anything if he wants to share any updates or just give some context. He hasn't been feeling well, but he is joining us and he is here. So Michael, feel free to say anything to the committee that you want.
Hey, everyone. I'm not a bit under the weather, so I'm about actually exactly a mile from where you are in my home office, but I wanted to join virtually and just thank the team at EXLD for carrying the water this morning and available for any questions if you have. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Josh, I do know that when we've talked about reductions before, we've asked to look at it regionally to see if we can see any trends. I'm wondering if for our next meeting, we could take some of these reductions and look at it regionally to see if we are seeing any trends or seeing any, like if one region makes up 30%, that's alarming. And that means the technical assistance really needs to be beefed up. So it would be helpful as we look at reductions that we also look at it through the lens of regions. And I know we've talked about that at this committee before. So if it's possible to do that for our next meeting, looking specifically at these reductions as we move forward.
That's easy to do. And we can, give you that similar to what we did with the unspent funds spreadsheet. We can highlight each of these programs and break it down by region. I can tell you right now, probably the biggest one is Region 11, but that's only because they get most of the funding. So, and that's been, that's a trend. And it doesn't mean that, it's anything bad. It's just they get a lot of the funding. So most of the reductions are probably going to occur in Region 11.
But we could look at it as a rate or a percent of what, and that would then balance out the extra money, but it would say like what percent of that is from that region. So I think it's not just the raw number, but looking at it through trend data. Julie, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, I think it would also be helpful to understand the percentage the reduction represents as far as the whole amount of money that we have as well, because I'm guessing that 21st century might be a larger percentage, but I don't know if you have any insight into that of the whole that's available.
Well, based on this and based on what we know, what ACES is about 700 million, 750. So 11 million is very small compared to that. And typically our 21st century award is about 150, give or take. And so 14 million in the scheme of things, pretty small percentage. But we can add that to the spreadsheet as well. So it's exact based on what was requested, having a breakdown of each program component and how it is done regionally as well. So we can add that information.
Thanks, Josh.
Josh, I'd also ask a favor at the next meeting. I know we've done this in the past, but if we could have that, your update printed so we can, because I know we were all looking down frantically scribbling and not necessarily listening to everything. I think it would be helpful if we could get it printed also for the members.
Okay, I do want to note, I thought it was printed and also it was emailed to everyone. So everyone should have had a document titled EXLD updates that has this exact same information. All I did was copy and paste it from the EXLD updates document that was sent. And again, if it was not printed, I apologize.
Josh, I apologize. It's there. I thought it was the minutes. It's there. I have it. I apologize.
All
I'm going
good.
to erase my note.
All good. I
I read
try
the
to be
minutes
on
and
it.
thought
I'm
it was
not
part of
perfect,
that.
but I try to be on it. So
You were on it. Thank you
all
very
good.
much. Any other
I-
questions? Go ahead, Josh.
No, go ahead. I was going to move to this document right here. If there's no more questions on that.
Go ahead.
So this document, again, just so everyone knows, the Before and After School Advisory Committee, they requested trend data of unspent funds starting with fiscal year 2017-18 for our different programs of ACES Frontier, 21st Century, and Assets. They requested a breakdown for done by regions, similar to what they've requested for the reduction. So we were able to send that document to them. It was very tabbed, it was very long. They were sent it in advance, but for the purposes of this meeting, I thought I would just capture what this looks like for each program for each year, just so everyone can see. I'm not going to read this, at all, but it is a visual. This is it being recorded so people can look at this after the meeting, so they can look at how much was awarded each year and how much was unspent each year. And I do want to note that some of the context is for some of those years where there may have been a larger unspent funds, that's when we had quite a few ESSER dollars and as well as ELOP going out to the field. So that does impact some of the unspent funds, as ELOP was a brand new program and ESSER dollars. Those are being prioritized because so we could spend down those dollars as well. So based on this and based on what the committee members were sent, again, happy to answer any questions or if you have any reactions based on what you've reviewed. Happy to just kind of hear your thoughts.
Everyone is leaning forward in their chair trying to read the document, Josh.
Yeah, I know this one's pretty small. And again, we can talk about this in the future too. Again, this does not need to be a one and done conversation. The spreadsheet. And again, I think what we'll do every year is the spreadsheet that Emily and Kindred had created. We can continue to add on to that every year. And it can be a topic that if the committee wants to talk about it at any time, we'll be ready to have the data so we can discuss it, or if you have any reactions to it.
I have a question from Jennifer and then Brad.
I cannot see it from this far, but I do want to know, has CDE seen any trends or patterns in the data as you've looked at the figures?
The only kind of thing that I've noted is, when we looked at, for instance, 22, 23, you have 35 million for ACES unspent, but again, that's taking into consideration ESSER dollars being prioritized and also ELOP. You see it did go down in 23, 24, and then it kind of went back up again in 24, 25. And so it will be interesting to see specifically for ACES how this unfolds over the next several years, knowing that there's been an increased investment in ELOP and what that looks like. Also, really looking at one comprehensive program, right? And I think that also impacts unspent funds, but also reductions. If programs are operating one comprehensive program with ELOP, ACES, and 21st, they can count all that for attendance for ACES and 21st Century. If they're not operating as a one comprehensive program, then that separate ELLP program, those students cannot be counted for attendance. So I think we are still trying to preach that message to the field. And we know that some are doing it and we know that some are not doing it. And so that's just one thing I wanted to know. But happy to see if anyone else notices any trends just from looking at it. Again, all of you are out in the field. You are practitioners. You see things. I'd be interested to hear. What are your thoughts on some of these unspent funds, or what are some of the issues in the field that may be occurring for these unspent funds?
Brad?
First, I want to say thank you to whomever spent the time to put this all together and send this unspent documents going back to the 17-18 school year. It was obviously a lot of work, but it was incredibly helpful. We only got it a couple days ago, so I couldn't play with it the way that I wanted to, but I did play with it a little bit. And one of the trends to that point is when you look at them as percentages, 21st Century Elementary and Middle School, the average over the past, 8 years is 6.8% unspent. ACES is 1.8% unspent, and assets is 4.1% unspent. So if we talk about, well, what funding source is not being spent, it's the 21st Century Elementary and Middle School by more than double what we're seeing, 4 times, a 4x on ACES. So it's a trend that I think everybody knew, which is what's the protected money from an expense perspective. I would love to be able to play with the data further by layering on the reductions as a tab next to unspent. So you've got 2 things happening simultaneously. People can't spend the dollars or they're not getting the attendance. And if we could get that, which was discussed in an earlier slide, for the same years layered as tabs, I think we can get some pretty quick analysis about what is the story regarding both expenditures and attendance by funding stream.
Brad, can you just say 21st Century Elementary and Middle was 6.8, assets was 4.1. What was ACES?
1.8%, when that's averaging every year. So like starting with the earliest years. And I hypothesized that there would be a trend that says that there was less unspent pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic was unspent because what are you spending it on? That was not a trend that we saw. The one year that was an outlier was the 21st Century Elementary and Middle School for the 1920 school year had 10% unspent, which was significantly more than the average of 1%, 2%, 3% for most other years. So that was the one big outlier. It's 1920 school year for 21st Century Elementary Middle Schools. That was the one outlier that I would like to dig into what happened that year.
And that also skewed then their whole percentage for the 8-year trend.
Not a lot, because it went by year, it went 6%, 10%, 9%, 5%, 4%. So it's diminishing, whereas ACES is very consistent, 1% to 2% per year every year.
Jennifer, and then Diane, and then Tony.
I agree with everything you just said. I want to clarify, when you're saying attendance, you're talking about program attendance, correct?
Correct, which would trigger reductions.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked that is because, and I don't know how big of an ask this is, but I would be curious to know then how does declining enrollment play a factor into that as well? Because we have districts that are declining at crazy rates. And when you have less students to pull in for attendance, then that creates some issues. And I know there's school closures and optimizations that's happening, but I'd be curious to see how that plays a factor into the attendance trends, which then impact the reductions as well.
Also, you had COVID, right?
So in my experience, you have to get the data first and then begin to tell stories about the data. You can't tell stories and try and get the data to match the story. So I don't disagree with any of those factors, but my ask would be that we get the data into spreadsheets. We do some analysis of the data and then begin to look at what is the story behind the data. I think it might send us sideways if we start with all of the, what do we anticipate the data will say first?
Diane, and then Tony.
Yeah, I agree with all of that analysis. And I do want to say thank you for the spreadsheet. This, I'm sure took a lot of time to do, but I think it is trying to help us get to a point where we can try to fix, do some solution finding, right, and support. I was just curious about Region 8 did have quite a bit of unspent assets funding the last couple of years, 23, 24, and 24, 25. And so did, and then consistently Region 11 is on the higher end. And the only reason I'm flagging those because I think that might be part of the storytelling is being able to help us identify what, kind of what's happening in some of those areas where we could provide some support.
Any other questions, Tony?
So, part of me, I'm the least knowledgeable on a lot of this, but I'm going to go with the layperson's question. With respect to 2025, first of all, thank you very much for the information. With respect to 2025, 28 million, 6.4 million, 3.9 million unspent, then creates reductions. Is there a scenario in which the unspent dollars and the reductions could somehow find their way into community-based organizations around the state that are not already in pipelines, who may not have the capacity at the moment in time for applying for some of these types of funds in a different way, right? They don't have the infrastructure in the same way, so that we don't have to work with reductions, or we don't have to, it's the process. In other words, can we fix the process so that we could also allow, just for the unspent dollars, some sort of process that allows more participation from CBOs across the state?
I mean, I think that's more of a legislative type of question, and I see Michael on screen, so I'll pass it to him.
Yeah, Tony. I mean, for example, ACES is Proposition 98 funding. So it can only go to a local educational agency by law. And all of these requirements are in education code. Of course, a community-based organization can apply for 21st century, but it needs to be in partnership with a school site LEA. So these are all legislatively mandated requirements. It's the legacy of education funding for after-school programs, because it's through the Department of Education. It is earmarked for some connection to public schools.
Thank you for that. I think I understand this is sort of the most that we can do from the legislative end of this. And so I just wanted to be on the record to say that the processes still at the district level are challenging in Los Angeles for small providers. We're taking lots of meetings with specific districts within the Los Angeles area around why can't we receive and find a way to get these dollars out. And I realize and recognize that it doesn't seem to be the fact that we're not getting the money down through LEAs. It's that we're not able to get the money out from LEAs into the communities.
Thank you. Diane?
Yeah, Tony, I think what you're calling out is an equity issue also, because I think the communities like in the San Jose area and Santa Clara County region, there have been different school closures that have been in predominantly communities of color, high concentrations of lower income families, and then keeping the other schools. So when there's school closures combined with access to space or ineligibility for those providers to be able to access some of these funds, you're missing a real key population and demographic of young people that this intent of this funding is supposed to serve, which are a lot of the English learners, a lot of the students that need additional support, our special education students, things like that, that really need that additional support and don't always necessarily even have transportation, right? So I think that's a consideration that maybe, and I don't know a remedy for that as far as like a special convening or a committee or something, just to consider what equity really looks like when it comes to the disbursement of these funds and a legislative solution to that.
Michael, any other comments? Thank
No,
you.
Cindy.
Thank you. Yes, Brad?
All right, policy, rules. I'm not good at rules, so I gotta get clarification before I break them. This data that's been summarized here was shared by region to the committee here. Is that subset of data that's by region also public now that this is public?
Yes.
Thank you.
Josh, this is posted on the website now, or Kendra or Emily, it's posted now.
Well, it has not been posted as of yet. Usually we post things after the meeting. So we will do our best to post it. Hopefully we don't run into any 508 issues, but yeah, we should be able to post it under the April 2026 meeting date.
Thank you. So our little data nerd over here, Josh, wants to play more hours on it, is what this question is.
Hey, Brad says he didn't review anything, but then he decides to come up with figures and 1% and 3% and 4%. So I'm loving it, Brad. Good job.
Chris, you had a question.
Yeah, so because we mentioned this is public, I think it's important for viewers, but also people who maybe aren't talking about this all of the time, about unspent funds. But what sort of supports does the system give to districts that aren't spending funds? And we got knowledge of some that weren't on target to spending funds. What sort of supports do those districts get?
Josh, you want to jump in? I know the critical support and the TA and these kinds of things.
Great question, Chris. Again, for everyone in person and viewing, the Expanded Learning Division has a comprehensive statewide system of support where we actually give funds to county offices of education in partnership with our own staff, CDE education programs consultant, and a CDE fiscal analyst. They partner with their county office of education team. And their main job is to provide critical technical assistance to the field. Each of these county offices of education has a work plan. In preparation for them completing their work plan, which they submit to the California Department of Education Expanded Learning Division, our internal team sends them quite a variety of data. And a few of those data points include attendance, trends. It includes previous audit findings. It includes previous federal program monitoring findings and more. And again, the job of the regional team is to really analyze that data, provide support, and kind of prioritize which LEAs and sites need that support. Another thing that we have given them also is unspent funds. So the regional team, they do provide a lot of critical support to the field. And I'll pause there to see if Michael wants to add anything else on this whole system of support or anything else.
I'm fine. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Go ahead, Julie.
Josh, I also just want to say thank you for this data. It's really great. I think that this next year is going to be really illuminating as well, so that we can start seeing the real trend post ELOP when you haven't had the carryover dollars, right? So not surprising, but this is super, super helpful. And I think this is a year that's going to really flesh out the picture. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Again, I just want to note, I'm just the messenger. The real work with this data was, I believe Emily and Kindred were involved. And again, I'm not sure if their staff was involved, but again, they did a bang up job getting this data out. So all the credit goes to them. And again, they will continue to work on the requests that the committee has requested on reductions and so on and so forth. So thank you. And I also do want to note, we have a committee member that has joined virtually, Tiffany Gibson. So thank you, Tiffany, for joining. She had some problems this morning with her flight, but guess what? She is here. And this is why we have a virtual link in case issues like this do occur. So thank you, Tiffany, and welcome.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you checking that. And Tiffany, we will mark you in participation and here today, just offsite. I do want to say I was remiss. I did not ask Emily and Kendra to introduce themselves. So I apologize. If you guys can introduce yourself, that would be helpful because I know we're all using your name, but we didn't say that you were here. So
That's okay. My name's Emily Romine. I'm one of the supervisors over the fiscal analyst.
My name is Kendra Bang. I'm also one of the supervisors over the fiscal analyst here.
thank you for being here and thank you for fielding our questions and getting all of the data geeks on this committee as much data as they want. So unfortunately, we have a few, or fortunately, sorry. Josh, I think you're going to give us a ELOP update also.
Yeah. So again, before the ELOP update, just because Kendra and Emily introduced themselves, I think it's important for people to recognize that they are in charge of our overall operation, payments, grant awards, reductions. Their team is always working behind the scenes relentlessly to do this work. So they may not, have all the platforms and do all the speaking and all that stuff, but it is them that keeps our operation running. And so again, feel free to reach out to them, give them love and support because they do an amazing job. Moving on to the ELOP, quick update. The expenditure report portal will be open from July 1st through September 30th. Submissions or corrections after September 30th will not be accepted. The third-party offsite provider report timeline will now align with the expenditure report timeline, and the operational intent is due to the principal apportionment data collection office on May 1st. So that is a quick update. Again, this information has been and will continue to be shared via eBlast to the field.
Is that their real name? Principal Apportionment Data Collection Office?
It sure is.
Wow. Where do you work? I don't know. It's a long name that, any questions for any members on the ELOP update? Thank you. We are going to continue to move.
Yeah, at this time, Sandy, I'll pass it back to you for the special presentations and I'll share the screen for each of the presentations.
If we could, Tony has a quick question, Josh.
Sure.
Josh, timing wise, will we get to a place with ELOP, or did we already and I missed it, where we can get one of those fancy reports of spent and unspent?
I'm sure we can. Again, I believe we have that, but we can add it a column. We don't have it by region, I don't think, because it's something that is collected by our school fiscal services and it's collected as a whole. But we can look at each year and put a report together of each year how much was given out and how much was unspent. And I see Michael coming out off of mute and on screen. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. Well, remember the ELOP, we only have 1 year of data on spent and unspent because it's 2 years delayed. Because once an apportionment is given, an LEA has 2 years to spend it. So we do have the the expenditure report that we have collected is online. It's on the CDE website and available, and that actually can be broken down by region. And I was preparing some of this for the Boost Town Hall next week. I don't know if I can share this or not. I don't know if this is going to work. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So just for the 23-24 school year, and again with ELOP, all we have is what the LEA reports. We don't get anything detail about how they spent the money, This is because it's an apportionment like the local control funding formula funds. But what I can tell you is for 23-24, 1,380 LEAs reported they expended 100%. 69 LEAs, local educational agencies, reported they spent between 75 to 99%. 56 LEAs reported they spent 50 to 74.99%. 40 reported they spent 25 to 49.99%. And 63 reported they spent 0 to 24.99%. We have that, the information about specifically which LEAs spent what and the percentage they spent is on our website. You can go look it up. So if you're wondering, well, what about my district? What did they report? You can actually go look it up on the website. We have taken this data and broken it down and sent it out to our system of support. So our regional teams assigned to regions, the county office, the education program consultant, and fiscal analysts specifically have been instructed to be in contact with those LEAs that were in the high percentage of unspent money and to target those LEAs for their critical support for this next coming year. And that is being done. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Feel better.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen for the CAN presentation. I can find it.
Josh, you can publicly, I know there are some people with questions in the public. You can share those questions and answer them verbally.
All right, I will do that before I share my screen for the CAN presentation. So there are a few questions and answers that have been asked. The first one is, what is FRPM? So that is free and reduced price meal percentage. That is what FRPM is. The second question, if we are an LEA that received reductions for a couple of sites, can we reapply for it for future RFAs if there is a wait period to reapply? Yes, you can reapply. Part of ACES Universal states it is for those that previously did have a reduction or for brand new sites that want to apply. And so obviously we're in a reduction. Reduction just happened. We had an RFA out. So obviously you would have to wait for the next. If you just got reduced, you would have to wait for the next RFA, which will be coming out probably this fall or winter. So yes, you can reapply. Can you briefly go over the large school adjustment application? Who can apply? How much can we request? Great question. Large school adjustment is specifically for when you apply for ACES or 21st Century. It is for, again, I think I'm right here. I don't have the information in front of me, but for elementary schools, if you have a total enrollment over 600, and for middle schools, if you have a total enrollment over 900, there is a specific calculation that is in the RFA about how much more you can apply for. So that is what a large school adjustment is, and the information is in the request for applications. And one other one, this is a long one, so bear with me. For us, we already operate as one comprehensive program with ELOP, ACES, and assets. What we see hurting us the most is the attendance flexibility that ELOP gives families. Before, our families made an extra effort to attend, knowing there were minimum participation requirements. Parents made sure their child attended regularly. Now parents know they have lots of flexibility. So we have seats taken by students that don't attend regularly, yet we have strict student to staff ratios that prevent us from over-enrolling. So this is more of a comment regarding one comprehensive program.
Josh, let me chime in. We've tried to address this ever since the inception of ELOP in numerous ways. We've rewritten the frequently asked question guidance on our website about early release policy. We helped perpetuate a myth that ACE's attendance requirements were more rigid than ELOP. And in fact, they're not. There's a line in the education code that said it is the intent of the legislature that children attend every day the program is open for elementary and middle. And that, of course, I'm just going to take a little bit longer here because this is now recorded. So hopefully it'll get some traction and people can hear it more often. That phrase was put into education code at a time when early research was trying to document the impacts of children attending after school programs. And what we knew then and know now is the more dosage or the more days that students attend, the greater the outcomes, the greater the likelihood that there'll be positive benefits and outcomes from their attendance. So that was an encouragement to try to get people to attend more. However, the intent of the legislature does not make it the law. It is not, in education code, if it says a student shall attend, that makes it a requirement. The intent is simply that, the intent language. There's no penalty. There was a time when, years ago, like 20 years ago, when people were trying to say, if a child doesn't attend every day, you can't count them if they attend one day because of how they were interpreting that language. And that's incorrect. So you all know if a child comes on Monday and not the rest of the week, that you still count the child. There's no audit penalty for them not attending. There's no consequence. And so what we have been clear is that and for early release or for some kind of excused absence, there you can we instruct people that you can have on your early release policy family choice. So my experience with this is that districts themselves put on more stringent requirements for attendance than the law requires. That is also permissible. Going back to San Francisco 20 years ago, my after-school programs, 25, 30 years ago, my after-school programs, we interpreted this, that we're going to prioritize students who commit to attend every day. And we did. And the reality is that when students started to come 1, 2, 3 days, there was a conversation with the parents that we've got kids on the waiting list. So if your child cannot attend every day, we're going to have to give their slot to a child who can commit to attend every day. Well, that's a choice, but it's also now, I believe, and inequitable action. Because the reason ELOP says attendance is based on the needs of the family is that some children who can't attend every day might be the children that need the support the most. They can't attend for a variety of reasons. And then there's, of course, families who it is a choice, but the bottom line is it is a myth that ACES has more strict requirements than ELOP. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or go into that more, but we're trying to get this message out. That doesn't that doesn't minimize the challenge that was in that question or that statement, that staffing towards ratio when you're not sure about how many kids are going to come is a challenge. I'm not minimizing the challenge of this. I'm just trying to address the fact that we've actually had LEAs say we're going to turn in our ACES funding. We're going to give up our ACES grants because they're too restrictive, and we're just going to use ELOP money, and it's based on false information.
Thank you, Michael. Any other questions? Josh, did that wrap up the questions that were posted?
Yeah, there was one question that I was unclear on, so I did respond that I was unclear of their question and the acronym. It had to do with UPK, but I have asked them to clarify. So if they clarify it, I'll read it later on in the meeting.
Thank you. Jeff, can you join us? I apologize. If you can share your screen, Josh.
Yep.
Welcome, Mr.
Check, check.
Davis.
Well, thank you as always. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to share with you. And some of, while Josh is bringing this up, some of what I will share is, and just want to appreciate the questions from those joining virtually and let you know that there are places where you can continually go and get questions like that answered. And these are called virtual office hours. They're held quite frequently, and I'll be reporting a little bit on that. So yeah, I just wanted to just kind of come and give an update on our work in partnership with CDE over the last quarter since we've seen you. And since we've seen you, we've been implementing expanded learning academies and office hours, our site coordinator expanded learning symposium. We've been advancing efforts on the ecosystem plan for expanded learning. And I'll just say a little bit about some of the connection points across systems that we're looking to make. So one, just sort of what you see on screen is kind of what we prepare for the system of support and put on our website at the beginning of the year that really outlines a lot of the things that that we do in partnership with CDE that are considered universal technical assistance. The academies and office hours, namely, and you can see all of those dates of when those occur on that resource. And if we go to the next slide, most recently, we held our Spring Expanded Learning Academy, and we've determined sort of the concepts that we put forward for these academies in partnership with the system of support for expanded learning, which includes, right, the county leads that were referred to earlier, as well as the Department of Education's Expanded Learning Division. And, you know, it was really, I think, clear and evident that there was kind of a lot of the like, okay, let's kind of go back to the basics with the most recent sort of set of academies. And we had some really brilliant ones. Definitely some great resources to disseminate, right? Everything that was shared, the slide decks, the recordings, everything is available on the California After School Network website. But we did, in partnership and really Michael's brainchild, having gone to the release of the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine report on the future of youth development. I think really inspired Michael to think, you know, we really have to remind people about the scientific framework behind our quality framework. So some nationally renowned researchers came and discussed our quality standards and the research base and the conditions for thriving, and even some emerging longitudinal research that's coming out from Deborah Vandell about, when you actually follow kids that participated and you follow kids that didn't, the kids that participated are doing better in life as young adults. So the proof is in the pudding. And then, right, like I'd mentioned, a lot of this back to basics and sort of the data piece where ELOP is going to start becoming embedded and shared data on expanded learning through CalPads, right? So what does that mean? And then a great workshop with a couple of districts and really highlighting their chief business officers and how their chief business officers work really in partnership with their programmatic individuals to maximize the opportunity that is ELOP. And you start to see that when that's happening and when that partnership really truly exists, some really great and amazing things can happen for kids. So you can see the registration numbers. At time of making this presentation, I didn't have the actual attendee numbers, but that's something that we always do report to the department. We can take a look at the next slide, and I believe this one is referring to the office hours. So over 1,000 folks have joined office hours. You can see the most recent ones. There's some numbers there in terms of the winter and spring office hours that have been implemented. And what we're starting to notice is that we're seeing more and more questions that are getting more and more, I think, sophisticated in terms of attendance recovery. So that I think is sort of like a vibe check that folks are really now starting to dig into attendance recovery and leverage this opportunity at school districts, which I think when we talk about things like declining enrollment, the fiscal cliff, this is something that I think is a real sort of feather in our cap as expanded learning practitioners to be able to share with districts. Like this is something that also can help as a sustainability strategy for your LEA in these times. And I think just as Josh was alluding to in the conversations about reductions, right? One comprehensive program is still a thing. I think that is going to be the thing that we're sort of like moving for quite some time, just like the foundations of quality and the quality standards, right? So these are some things that are coming up in office hours, and just wanting to put it out there for those folks that were asking some of those technical questions. This is a space that is not recorded on purpose so that people can come and ask their authentic questions. It's also a place where people come and they brag on themselves as well. They say, you know what, here's what we did with this, and sort of becomes an idea sharing space across the whole state of like how we can maximize these types of resources to help our kids, families, and communities. Taking a look at the next slide. We just in February in Long Beach had our site coordinator expanded learning symposium. We had a whole number of site visits that were really powerful, right? Clearly the workshops, plenaries, and then the opportunity for community. One of the things I like to share about the site coordinator expanded learning symposium is that there's kind of a magic because site coordinators, they really are this sort of like hub between like the students, the families, their staff, the school administration, right? So another way to say that is they're sort of getting it from all angles and they're sort of isolated in that, right? And so a lot of times they start to feel like their challenges are unique, and there's this real beauty of bringing site coordinators together and folks just not feeling alone and feeling like, oh my gosh, you're going through that too. And what did you do? And the sort of the idea exchange that happens there organically is sort of just as much of the magic of the event as the workshops or the inspiring plenaries and things of that nature. The relationship with CDE, just to say out loud, is that CDE provides a small amount of funding, not the funding for the entire symposium, That usually allows us to secure the facility. So we consider CDE as our top sponsor. But then what we're able to do to keep the prices really low for our site coordinators is that we do engage other partners, service providers, curriculum providers, and things of that nature that support the event. We don't call them sponsors. We call them site coordinator supporters, and we call them partners because without the resources they provide, we would not be able to do the event. It's sort of I'd shared with you in a previous presentation, right, that CAN as an organization has some diversified funding, but that even this CDE funded partnership also is something that we diversify the funds to maximize the experience and the opportunity for those that participate. So next year we'll be in Fresno. We also rotate geographically to create access throughout the state. So hope to see everyone there. Next slide. And as you know, the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program operating at scale is really providing us the opportunity to create a new strategic plan for California's expanded learning programs. As all strategic plans, the former ones lovingly referred to as 1.0 and 2.0. This is shorthand for this is Strategic Plan 3.0, but it is the ecosystem plan for expanded learning. So looking at the scale of expanded learning in California, how is expanded learning a critical part of an education, health, and human services ecosystem? And so we're convening across lots of sectors. We've done a gap analysis, and we are now beginning to conduct listening sessions. And we partnered with a data partner to help us design and implement listening sessions all throughout the field. So the amount of data and perspective that is going to end up informing this ecosystem plan is going to be massive. But we can take a look at the next slide to sort of see where we are in our progress. We anticipate a release in fall 2026 of the artifact of the plan, but we also understand that conversations across systems become complex. So it's going to be really interesting how we consider dissemination of such a plan. Like, I don't think that this is something that you can just put out right in an email blast and expect everyone to understand, like collaboration across systems. So really trying to think about what would it look like to do more regional convening around these kinds of things and bring multiple partners across sectors to actually meet with each other and interpret what is the recommendations in the plan and start to consider how they might implement locally in collaboration with one another. So that's what we anticipate after fall of 2026. And we continue to seek to garner philanthropy resources to support that type of process. And we can go to the next slide. In other news, you've heard me share about some of our workforce development and apprenticeship efforts. We now do have Federal Department of Labor approved standards, and we're moving towards implementation of statewide apprenticeships as part of the California Opportunity Youth Apprenticeship, funded through the Division of Apprenticeship Standards of the Department of Industrial Relations. And another conversation that we're having is how these standards and competencies can be leveraged by the CTE program as they're developing a new CTE pathway to teaching. And we've been part of sort of ad hoc committee work, and our draft standards, while they're awaiting approval, have been shared with that group so that they can consider them as part of expanded learning as part of that pathway and looking at those competencies as being foundational. I think just a couple things to share just really briefly is that we also do participate in the CCEE system of support. So we are a voice for expanded learning and sharing resources in that space so that the broader county-based system that's working on inclusion and supporting literacy and all the different kinds of county-based TA understand that there's a system of support for expanded learning and that there are resources that they can access, like to support attendance recovery and things of that nature. And we've also been part of an interesting conversation between social services and the Department of Ed, where they're trying to translate what social services calls the integrated core practices model, which essentially we think of as multi-tiered systems of support. So they're actually creating a crosswalk sort of document so that social services can actually talk with education about what it looks like to provide holistic wraparound supports for children and youth. I think that that's the end of my update. Josh, can you just see if there's anything else? Yep, that is the end of the CAN update.
Any questions for Jeff? Comments? Julie?
Just a couple of comments. Thank you so much, Jeff. This is really great. I just want to reinforce, we are also seeing in a lot of districts this tension between historic childcare and the addition of ELOP and running those as parallel programs. And I think I just want to also highlight that that's not only in attendance, but also when it comes to quality standards and those things looking very differently on both sides. We're even seeing RFPs still, right? That you can run our ACES program while we run our ELOP or whatever, right? So I really appreciate you highlighting that. That's a trend that's still really concerning. So thank you. And then the other piece is just thank you for your continued support of site coordinators. Their jobs get increasingly more difficult with the volume of students attending these programs and the year-round offerings. So just really appreciate all that you're doing to support site coordinators.
Thank you. And another thing that I would just share about that, the childcare piece is that it's definitely coming up in the office hours is how do we, because staff qualifications is another major piece there, which I think is probably more the case than even quality alignment, because quality alignment is pretty clear. Like it's comparable, right? There you can crosswalk that, but the staff qualification piece and the ratio piece and all of that ends up being really challenging. And so we are doing listening sessions with that group and expanded learning practitioners together to sort of see what this needs to look like sort of in a 3.0 world.
And are you seeing it in the early learning when you say childcare, or are you also seeing it in kind of the fee-based when it comes to tier 2 districts? What are you qualifying as childcare when you say it?
Yeah, there are a variety of programs, but I think that a lot of it is the school-aged childcare. Yeah,
that's what I was referencing to, but thank you.
Diane?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the site coordinator support and using that collective model to kind of get to serve more staff. It's just been really an essential piece of the training that we've been able to provide for us folks. But I had a question for you regarding the integrated core practices model, the MTSS, all of that stuff with the integrated model that you're trying to bring together. I think that's really brave and needed, especially here. Back in the old days, Prop 49 was really a violence prevention strategy, was keeping young people safe, and we've been able to do a lot of that. Recently, I saw a statistic in Santa Clara County where 85% of the students incarcerated in the juvenile justice system had special education needs. And they were teenagers, right? Probably 14, 15. So I think there's still gaps, obviously, in the support that we're able to provide after school. We know the intent is there to serve all young people, and especially at-promise young people and special needs students. And I'm curious, how you've been able to integrate that specifically in any of these conversations. Do you have specific committees around that or working with that Promise Youth, and what your plan is with that?
You know, I think that's, I mean, there's a lot of ways that I could think about considering that question. One, you know, one of the things that I'm going to actually be doing as part of my listening session work is I think that there's about 16 county-based agencies that are providing support for children and youth with special needs. And so I'm just really interested in getting as many of them that are willing to come to a table to one table and talk about what does it look like in expanded learning when we're providing those levels of supports for children and youth with special needs, because that's been a core issue, right? There are lots of folks that are out there doing it really well and with strong principles and sort of commitments behind that. And then there are others that I think are struggling to figure that out. So so that's one thing that you know, I hope just in general that in expanded learning that it's just sort of just part of the air we breathe, that we're supporting children and youth with special needs in the ways that they need it, right? But in terms of where the integrated core practices model and MTSS come together, I really think that it's at those county groups that are discussing their AB 2083 collaboration. And I have not had many conversations with those groups about that student population in particular. That would be a fascinating conversation to have. And if you are part of any of those communities, like, I would be happy to partner with you on a listening session to see how we can gather data to stop that pipeline from taking place.
Yeah, and we would be more than happy to partner with you on any of the listening sessions, specifically in working with that Promise Youth and special needs students. I think being able to bring those specific best practices and elevate core trainings targeted specifically for those groups and positive youth development, I think would be essential in our work with young people across the state. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to help you support that.
All right. Well, I've owed you an email for months, so.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any other questions? Thank you for joining us and for your PowerPoint in a timely fashion.
An honor and a pleasure.
Thrilled. So we're going to continue to move on to the agenda with the Partnership for Children and call up to start with Laura, and then there will be several other presenters with her. Welcome.
Okay, is this working?
Yes.
Awesome. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Laura Beebe here on behalf of the Partnership for Children and Youth, which coordinates CA3, or the California After School Advocacy Alliance. And we're really excited to talk to you today about some of our advocacy efforts around older youth, specifically middle school and high school students. Before I get too far into this, and this will be a relatively short presentation, but hope also to have some time for discussion. I do want to name that I'm relatively new to PCY. It is my second stint there, but I did spend the last decade at LA's Best, which you all may know is an elementary school program. So older youth is a bit of a newer territory for me. That being said, it has long been a priority of both PCY and CA3. And so I'm happy to be here representing our team and also my boss, Jessica, who just started her very well-deserved sabbatical actually yesterday. I also just want to name personally that for me, this issue for older youth, the gap in funding and resources, is really one of the reasons I made the decision to move from LA's Best to PCY. It's a huge opportunity for California, and I'm really excited to be working on it now. So before I jump in, just a quick overview of what we'll run through quickly today. We're going to first share a brief overview of CA3 in case anyone's not familiar. We'll share a very, very quick highlights of some of the research around older youth, a little bit about the context of our advocacy efforts, a few of the funding scenarios that we have considered and been considering in recent years, months, weeks, even days. And then we'll get into our current proposal this year, AB 2430, as well as a little bit about our budget advocacy. We're also very excited to be joined by some people who are really working directly on this from the Sacramento Chinese Community Center. So you'll get a chance to hear from them, and I hope that's a highlight for you. And then, as I mentioned, I hope there's time to hear from you, collect your feedback, your insight, given all of the expertise and wisdom on this committee. So with that, we'll turn to the next slide. Back a couple. Great. I think many of you are familiar with CA3. So just to be very brief here, we are a coalition of more than 40 organizations. We serve more than 500,000 students statewide at over 3,000 school sites. So a really large reach. And since 2009, this coalition has been advocating for publicly funded expanded learning programs. And, big shout out to many of you on this committee who have been leaders in this work and also leaders in the work to promote resources for older youth. Next slide. Just so you all are aware, again, for CA3, we develop our priorities collaboratively with our organizations. And this year, the results were really clear. So protecting and growing ELOP will always be a North Star of this coalition. However, this year, we also had 100% unanimous agreement that we need to increase state funds for older youth. And that's from programs that serve elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, all across the board. Everyone agreed that this is a priority and this is an urgent priority. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. And we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to be really quick here because, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You all are very familiar with this, but just important to take a moment to highlight the importance of expanded learning for adolescents. Adolescence is really this period of amazing opportunity, and there has been a lot of research, especially out of the UCLA Center for the Developing Adolescents, around how much these years matter. This description of adolescence as a time of remarkable opportunity, a period of rapid growth where young people forge their sense of who they are and who they aspire to be. You'll hear a little bit more about this from our partners, but expanded learning is really the perfect platform for this. And we know expanded learning works, right? We know that expanded learning makes a difference for these age groups. We have years and years of data that show that, including from some of the programs up here. So just a couple stats on the screen for you to take a look at. Expanded learning for adolescents has an impact on absence, which is really important right now, has an impact on protective factors, social emotional competencies, academics, state standards, college and career readiness, graduation rates, and English language learner reclassification. Again, there is just pages and pages of research. We've got a brief that we're happy to share with you. I believe it was included in the link, and encourage you to take a look at the data, which is very clear. But with that, we also want to note the reality as it comes to funding, right? California has nearly $5.5 billion in expanded learning funding, and less than 2% of that goes to high school students, even though they're about a third of the population. What that means in practice is that more than 1,000 low-income high schools have no funding for expanded learning, and 76 high school-only districts across the state, serving thousands and thousands of students, get no ELOP funding, so they don't have that as an option either. You'll notice there that middle schools fare slightly better with 5%, but only slightly, and again, those are critical years. So to keep us moving, next slide, please. I'm going to give a little bit of just quick context on the older youth advocacy in recent years, just to really highlight that this is not a new issue. This is something that we have been working on for many years, and we believe there is urgency right now to do something about it. The pandemic, obviously, as you all know, was an inflection point. School closures, ESSER dollars started flowing. Some districts started using those for older youth programs. And then, of course, ELOP launched in 2021, and this was a transformative investment for elementary school students. The following year, right after that, CA3 sponsored AB 2507 by Assemblymember McCarty, which proposed reprioritizing both ACES and 21st century dollars for older youth. AB 2507 was held in the Senate Appropriations Committee, but it did start and galvanize an important conversation about the issue. In 2024, we came back and CA3 sponsored AB 1113, which I know you all are familiar with. That bill did initially also have funding for older youth in it, but it was amended out and replaced with intent language. Intent language is great, but as Michael reminded us earlier, it is only intent language. So we were happy to get the CalPADS piece of that bill, which was a win. but disappointed that we weren't able to move the needle on older youth there. Also important to note, in 2024, as ESSER funds started sunsetting, some of those programs that had been funded through the federal funding had to close their doors or reduce their services. Bringing us closer to today, right? 2025 ELOP reaches 4.6 billion. We've heard that described as full implementation. Last summer was also a big moment for our advocacy when the Trump administration illegally froze those 21st century dollars, having a big impact on programs. While those were eventually released, this was a disruption that highlighted how unstable those dollars can be and also started to galvanize some of these advocacy efforts more. Next slide. So as we move into kind of our current advocacy efforts, I just want to share a little bit of framing to note that, we've spent, again, months and really years examining different scenarios. And there are a lot of different scenarios, and there are pros and cons of each one. As a coalition, we are constantly adapting through the legislative process and other processes. And we remain really open to feedback and ideas of what is the best path to pursue, both in terms of greatest impact and also most strategic. So these are just a couple scenarios. There are more, but so that you all know what some of the conversations have been about. As we think about older youth, of course, securing new funding is one of the most popular options on the table. No one has to lose anything. You don't have to make any hard decisions. That being said, this is a very challenging path. Given the current budget context, given the state of California's economy, and given the high levels of funding in ELOP right now, we do not hear a lot of appetite for new funding. That being said, we hear of opportunities. We hear there may be chances for one-time funding in this year's May revision, and those are certainly conversations we will continue. We also know there are sort of longer-term opportunities, such as social media settlements and other related funding streams. And we continue to engage in those, but again, want to note that we believe there is an urgent need now, and we need to be focused on short-term solutions too. So big part of the scenarios in the conversation is, of course, around ELOP, given how much money is in that. Pros of considering ELOP for older youth include that there have been some unspent funds, and include that there are many sites that are double or triple funded with ACES in 21st century. But a big con here with anything to do with ELOP is that we have learned that this governor is not supportive of that. So we know it would be an uphill battle to be able to move any ELOP dollars to high school or middle school youth. Another option here would be to require LEAs to spend a percentage of their ELOP on older youth. So this would not be taking any money away from their apportionment. It would be simpler logistically for them, but it would be requiring them to invest in older youth. We know that many districts are choosing to do this on their own and have been successful, so that's a pro there. But a con of this approach is that this would be a mandate for districts at a time when they're pushing back against many mandates and many overlapping initiatives. And this also wouldn't address the gap for high school only districts. The next scenario, which we'll talk about in our bill as well, is around ACES dollars. As I think you all saw in the presentation, there have been significant amounts of ACES dollars that have been unspent or returned to the state through grant reductions. And as was highlighted, ACES is now funding down to much lower FRPM percentages than ever before. And so we do believe there is an opportunity to better utilize those dollars for high need high schools. And this would begin to address the issue again of double funding between ELOP, ACES, and 21st century, even that triple funding. There are cons here, and we don't want to skate over those. Elementary schools would lose programs, potentially some that just received them right in that last round. And it's also complicated to amend Proposition 49, but that is something we are working through with, legal advice and legislative counsel as well. Another note is that while current scenarios are around reallocating ACES, there could also be an opportunity to reprioritize ACES instead of a reallocation, which is a bit of a softer option, but has similar pros and cons as well. And then last but not least, 21st century is another option. That is what we tried to do with AB 1113 a couple years ago. This is also makes sense administratively, right? Given assets already comes out of 21st century. It also gets to, Tony's comments about assets being able to go directly to community-based organizations. And similarly, addresses double and triple funding of sites. The con here is, again, that instability under the current federal administration and continuing with that. So Very quick summary, much more to discuss about all of these, but just wanted to give you kind of some highlights of what we've been discussing. We'll move to the next slide. And that brings us to AB 2430 and our current advocacy efforts. So this is our bill that was introduced this year by Assemblymember Al Murasucci, who is really a champion of public education and very committed to expanded learning. And this is a comprehensive bill that's really driven by our coalition priorities. And I'll just name that there's a lot in the bill. We're going to focus mostly on older youth today, but just think it's important that you know, beyond older youth, this bill also does a few other things. It establishes a temporary work group to make recommendations on ELOP funding rates, which we believe is very important for long-term sustainability of this program. It also requires regularly and publicly accessible reporting on expanded learning programs. We were very excited to get expanded learning into CalPADS, but now we need to make sure that that information is shared regularly in a way that is useful with both policymakers and the public. It also requires LEAs who are opting out of ELOP to meaningfully engage with the communities that would be impacted by that and makes that information public. And then last but not least, it requires childcare R&Rs to share information about ELOP so that we can hopefully reach more families. So those are the other parts of the bill. But again, the biggest and we think the most exciting part of this bill is around the older youth funding. And so specifically what AB 2430 would do as of now, and I'll just name as of now, we are at the beginning of a process. But as currently written, this bill would fund high school expanded learning programs by reallocating any ACES funds available after renewals to a program that we're modeling after assets. So it would not be going into the assets bucket, given these are Prop 98 dollars, but it would be a program that we are essentially setting up with the same parameters as assets. In addition to that, it would also establish that any school sites below 55% FRPM are no longer eligible for ACES renewals. So the money that becomes available from those programs that don't renew, as well as any other money that is available, would all go to this high school program. And that would be up to the $195 million that's been appropriated by the legislature. So the first $550 million of ACES that's guaranteed by Prop 49 would stay as is. That $195 million would be the pot of money that could go to this new program. I will just name here that this is not where the bill started. This was a compromise with the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. And I'll be transparent that it's not quite as much funding as we were hoping for, but we do want to name that we still believe it's a meaningful increase. And we also appreciate that this approach targets the schools with the greatest needs and really targets where the program can make a big impact. And I'll again just reiterate that this is the beginning of the process. We continue to be open to and really welcome and want to have dialogue and conversation around this bill. And we acknowledge that it will likely change, probably multiple times as we move through the next couple committee hearings. Also want to name what's important for you all, which is that the bill also increases the daily rate for existing assets grantees and for these new programs that we're creating. So it brings that rate from $10.18 to $13.81. We know, you all know that high school programs are more expensive, and we chose this dollar amount to mirror the percentage change in ACES from $7.50 to $10.18. And then finally, we are also aiming to clarify some attendance tracking for before and after school components of assets. So that is the bill right now. Next slide. And I'm happy to share that we have some great momentum. You know, we're really building off of the success of the California After School and Summer Challenge, which many of you participated in back in March. And we were thrilled to have, over 400 youth and staff at the Capitol. They were able to visit with all 120 legislative offices. And hearing those voices has really made a meaningful difference in our advocacy efforts. And then we're very happy to share that, despite the amendments and the negotiations with the chair, we did pass out of the Assembly Education Committee last week, and the bill passed unanimously with a 9-0 vote, with many supportive comments from the members of the committee, and also with 28 organizations in support, which is a number that we hope to grow in future hearings. And as we move to that, I want to take a moment and just introduce the people I have with me today. So we are really lucky to be joined by both Oliver and Callista, and Oliver was able to join us at the hearing last week and testify to the legislature. And I'll just name that, his remarks were not only a highlight for me, but were called out by several of the members on the committee for really just sharing his authentic voice and story about the impact of his program. And also thrilled to be joined by Callista as well, who is the Twin Rivers USD coordinator for youth workforce and high school development, has been an incredible leader in high school programs and also in our advocacy efforts. She's also a recent recipient of the Canon CDE Lights On Leadership Award. And Oliver and Callista, again, just really exemplify everything that we love about expanded learning and why these programs are so important. So I'd like to bring them up to share a few words, and then we'll close out and happy to answer any questions at that point.
Good morning. Really excited to be here. Before I share my thoughts, just want to express how passionate I am about older youth and the expanded learning world. I myself got to participate in expanded learning opportunities as a high schooler, and I really felt like that saved my life. And so post-graduation, I wanted to, I had this dream of bringing this to our youth. And so longer journey than that, don't have all the time to share at home, but that's kind of the spark of why I'm here today. I'm here as a member of CA3 and a representative for the agency I support, the Sacramento Chinese Community Service Center, or the center. The center serves over 100 after-school sites across 4 districts, including Elk Grove, Sacramento City Unified, Natomas, and in Twin Rivers. In Twin Rivers, I spearhead our youth workforce initiative, which hires 75 high school-aged youth students across all 5 high schools to tutor and mentor 1,500 elementary youth daily and 20 after-school programs, all in Twin Rivers. Through this program, high school-aged youth gain transferable skills as they undergo professional development and are elevated into early childhood education careers, as Oliver will testify. Additionally, the program participants become civically engaged in their communities, as seen through their participation in Challenge, where they marched, rallied, and met with legislative teams in an effort to advocate for their peers across California to have access to the unique opportunities they are afforded. This was highlighted by the Sacramento Observer and other local news outlets. Opportunities in this program are curated through my dedication to staying connected to youth workforce development, as seen through my participation in Partnership for Children and Youth 3LN, site visits with legislators, and various partnerships, including legislative offices, Sacramento County Office of Education, and our unique positioning in Twin Rivers. In Twin Rivers, we are grateful that district leadership makes it a priority that all students K through 12 have access to out-of-school time services through intentional programming and efficient resource allocation. It is because of this we have programs like Youth Workforce. Furthermore, through this partnership, we have been able to take the program a step towards excellence and begin the process of registering the program as an apprenticeship with state and federal agencies, enhancing our current internship model and the Twin Rivers Early Childhood Education Career Pathway. Since our program launch in 2023, we have been able to witness the impact of the Youth Workforce Program in the lives of over 5,000 youth, including program participants and the elementary youth they serve. It is my pleasure to now introduce one of those 5,000 youth, Oliver, a youth workforce and Twin Rivers alumni who now serves as a frontline staff member in one of our after-school programs.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Oliver and I'm 18, and I recently graduated from Creative Connections Arts Academy, or CCAA, here in Twin Rivers. Before I joined the Youth Workforce Program, I wouldn't say I was completely lost, but I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like people really recognized my true value. But that changed when I got the opportunity to intern at CCAA Elementary, at the after-school program at CCAA Elementary. What just started as an internship became something way bigger. It felt like a second home. My environment changed. Instead of getting into bad habits or being around the wrong things after school, I was going to work. I was spending time with kids who looked up to me, and honestly, they changed me. They taught me how powerful something as simple smile can be. They trusted me with things going on with their lives, and just being there for them, listening, made them feel cared and seen for. And at the same time, it made me realize something about myself. I wasn't lost. I just needed someone to see the value in me that I didn't see yet. This program helped me change my habits, my mindset, and the people I surround myself with. It gave me direction and something to work toward to. By passing AB 2430, California can make sure more high school students have access to the same kinds of programs that help me. programs that provide mentorship, purpose, and real opportunities to grow. I'm still figuring out my path, but I know I'm not the same person I was before this program. And I know there's students out there just like me who don't need everything figured out. They just need the right environment and someone who believes in them. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Callista and Oliver. And yeah, I won't follow that, but just want to appreciate their leadership, their advocacy, and the work they do every day. And that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. And I know we're probably running out of time, and we'll defer to the chair, but have left some questions here, for you all to think about. Again, there is a lot of wisdom and expertise and experience on this committee, and we really welcome your impact, your input, your feedback, your thoughts, on any of these scenarios, on our bill specifically. We're very interested. We have been and continue to convene conversations with current assets grantees so that we can better understand what's working with assets and what's not, and what would you need to change, right? And what sort of changes do require legislative fixes. So with that, I'll stop there. Encourage you all, if you're not already involved, to get involved with CA32, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver, Callista. Laura, great presentation, very, very informative. Thank you for being here. And I applaud you, Oliver, for your commitment and your passion for what you do, and so succinctly being able to talk about what it means to be seen and to be heard and then to give back. So thank you very much. I know there'll be questions from the committee. Brad, I'm going to start with you.
I knew this was coming.
Anyone would like to start? Yes, please, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I love that you brought Callista and Oliver out, who are living the work in the field, and as former members and participants of the program, it just shows the impact that expanded learning programs can have. I did have a question about, it stated that as part of the proposed bill, that it would require to not renew ACES programs that are below 55% FRPM. Do you know how many sites would be impacted if this was to move forward?
We've run some very rough estimates, but I'd want to defer to CDE for more formal answers of that. Happy to get some estimated numbers, but again, I know Kindred and Emily probably have much better information.
I don't know if that's something that's readily, that looks like maybe no.
And I can give you my estimate on number of dollars, which was about 40 million. So you can sort of extrapolate number of sites from there. But again, don't want to give you anything too precise without.
And then the follow-up, and maybe this is just the same, maybe it would have to be something we receive later, is how many sites, how many high school sites could that potentially fund?
Yes, absolutely. And happy to follow up again with some estimated numbers. We are prioritizing first that rate increase, followed by funding new high school sites. But we are estimating, it would be in the thousands of students. So happy to follow up with some projected numbers on that. Brad's doing some math on his agenda.
Get the 40 million, it would give about 150, 160 new schools and assets equivalent grant.
And I'll just name the information we also are incorporating. Actually, the presentation this morning from the Expanded Learning Division was very timely because this also includes those dollars available from grant reductions and unspent funds. And so we want to make sure we're factoring that into the total numbers as well.
I just want to just state that I heard Josh say that we funded programs below the 55%. So those are new funds that are going out that then this bill could would take away, not potentially.
Correct. Yes.
Tiffany, did you have a question? Okay, thank you. Julie?
I just want to add a follow-up to that, Jennifer, too, is because I think there is an equity issue in how some of this has been redistributed just due to the timing of it, right? Because I think some of those reductions are in areas that are so high need and still recovering from pandemic and then impacted by ICE, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been redistributed now to low FRPM. So there may be a reshuffling, but I understand the But I also just want to point out that I think there's some equitable redistribution that this could also help to correct.
Diane?
Yeah, thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for being here today and being an example of exactly why we want to have these kinds of investments in these programs. So, I think the choice of the, 55%, and above, and below, reshuffling that funding, that's the tough choice when the request was to increase the total amount of funding, so nobody has to lose, right? And that would be the ideal scenario, so that wouldn't be the case. But I think the reality is that that reshuffling did go to a lower percentage than ever before, because we had the opportunity to support more schools, and high school was not an option. I was asked if that would be a possibility to include older youth, and that was not a possibility. It has to come to a legislative action. So I just want to say that I think the fact that 100% of the coalition members said older youth has been and continues to be a priority is something that I think this committee has recognized for a while. And we want to, however this works out, I do think that intent is really clear and incredibly important to the state of California, especially with high school students being 33% of the population of California. It's a really important time because a lot of those young people were also impacted by the pandemic and ICE and all this other madness that's happening around us. So I do want to say that I think however we can support, however I can personally support, I'd love to be able to figure out a remedy for that. But I do think that there is a lot of possibilities and a lot of hope that this bill provides. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Tony?
Yeah, I don't want the train to run away. However, you look at trends in how we think about youth across the state, and a lot what we see are serving young people from whatever age you want to start at. Let's call it 5 or 6 years old through 24, 25, 26. The journey's not done. And I think this is a really great bill that helps us sort of center around where I feel like we need to center to be in line with the times, right? I think a lot of times we were sort of stuck in this, as an elementary, middle school thing. And now I think it's time, overdue. So I love this bill, and whatever we, can do to look at how we think about this, I think is really important too.
I'd like to comment on employing the high school students, internship or however. I think that's the key to our staff shortages that we're facing. And I'm from the rural, place in Northern California, and in my county, we have really started to focus on that. And we have increased our high school student employees. We've probably tripled it in the last couple of years. And by mentoring them and preparing them, they are continuing to work for us. And then they're becoming teachers. So it's amazing. But watching the relationships, like you talked about, Oliver, it's amazing. And I warn the students when I hire them, you are going to be a rock star in the campus. So be ready for that, because they will follow you around screaming your name. And it's true. It's an amazing relationship that the high school students have with the younger kids, and that we have with the high school students, and just continue. So I'm excited to see this is happening in other places, and I would encourage everyone. It's an amazing process. So thank you for sharing that.
Chris, and then we have Brad.
Thank you all for really doing a great job presenting. So there is a stigma that high school programs aren't well attended, and there is a stigma about that for middle school. Do we have any data to support what trends in attendance there are at high school programs around the state that could really support or give everyone more of a full scope of what that decision would look like?
We're all looking at Brad, who probably has some numbers he can pull out. But just naming that attendance looks different in high schools, I think that's important to recognize. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. High school students attend programs in different ways and different dosages. And we should acknowledge that and craft the programs and their requirements accordingly. But I'll see if Brad or other committee members might have data on this.
I can lean in. We don't have, I'm talking about from Can's perspective. We don't have numbers, but I just reached out to like Laura and Jessica, this was last week, saying that one of the things when some of these numbers came out about like the reductions, one of the things that Can is kind of interested in doing is trying to do at least some virtual kind of conversations with some of the folks that were reduced so we can get an idea out. Like Brad was saying, we need the hard number, but we need the narrative around what's caused some of that. And it might be, the reality is that some districts are right sizing. Enrollment is down as far as the schools go. So enrollment is down in programs. But like Laura just said, the structure of high school programming is different. And I don't know if the way that attendance has always been done is actually accurately captured some of that. So I'm hoping that what the bill is doing is it's having us to have more than a surface level conversation about pulling money from one group of kids to give to another group of kids, right? It's us having to really start to think about structurally, how are these programs designed? Where is funding coming from? And then what are different ways that we can speak to how are we supporting all of the young people in our spaces? So yeah, Chris, I don't know. I'm not sure. And I just feel like Brad is over there with a phone and a piece of paper doing some stuff, but I'm not sure like if we have those numbers up front.
And the other thing I'll just name in relation to Tiffany's comments is the importance of the rate increase here. We've been funding high school programs. They've only increased in their rate from $10 to $10.18, 18 cents over years and years. And we all know, and I think there is a lot of information available around why we need a higher rate for high school students. High school students vote with their feet, right? They only want to be in the program if it is a compelling place for them to be, if it is engaging. And to be able to make those programs engaging, $10.18 isn't doing it anymore. So that's another really important part of the bill and something we think would lead to higher quality programs and higher rates of attendance as well. The ability to bring in, specialty instructors, specialty programming, all of those things. And 1381 is not enough, but that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Brad?
I'll start with the data question that was asked. Yes, Stephanie, I had my calculator out and I've run these numbers before. So I think the easiest way to look at is the belief, as Chris, you talked about, like that kids don't show up for the high school programs. Is it accurate? We have data. It's called the reductions. And if you look at the 24-25 data we just got, if you look at the elementary data for reductions on 21st Century, it was at 12.3% reductions. And at the high school side, assets only it's 8%. So the data-wise, there is no truth to the idea that high school students show up less. Now, when you compare that to ACES, just to be really transparent, ACES reductions are a way smaller reduction. So it would tell you that the elementary schools, those programs are there. So I'll start with that. Now, the more important part is thank you so much for your presentation. It was amazing. And to hear students speaking about their experiences, a powerful, powerful voice and one we need far more frequently up here in Sacramento. So thank you for that. Laura, to have it all laid out in one place, to see the history and the rationale and the reason and what we've tried as a coalition in the past was brilliant. Thank you. I want that deck so I can reshare it out as many places as possible. I heard, Michael, you talked about at the last Boost conference, like we have to get out of a deficit mindset and remember it's an abundance mindset. I keep sitting in meetings hearing, well, what about the kids that are going to lose funding? Like the deficit mindset. I mean, it's insane to me that we seem to be focused on the few ACES schools that I do feel for. I think about those schools that are at 46% and they're going to lose an ACES grant. But the money being asked for, there was $66 million last year in reductions and unspent. People couldn't spend the money and they couldn't get the kids to serve. And we had 66 million, 40 million of which was ACES. So it's not really that people are going to lose things, it's that they haven't been using them before. And I'm struggling with why the narrative is so much about the schools that are going to lose. They're not, the data tells us they're not all using it. That doesn't include ELOP. And Mike, all I'm doing is restating the data that was shared with us today. Michael also said we got to get to the point of the ELOP. There were schools that said, I don't even want the ELOP money still there. And granted, that's a little bit behind by a year, but we're talking 66 million unspent and unearned before we even talk about the ELOP side. So I'm appreciative of the fight and the push that people are putting up here. I'm really appreciative of the deck that lays it all out in terms of the history and making that case. And I would love to get more insight from people in the community about why is it we're talking about the handful of schools that are below 55% and why that always rises to the top, not the like nobody can spend the money that they're being given right now. You know, that's data-based. So thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. And just want to continue to highlight, as you did, that while schools will be losing money, there is this persistent issue of double and triple funding that the legislature has been very focused on. I skipped, I think, right past budget advocacy, but we continue to be very engaged in budget advocacy as well. And this is something that has been raised by both budget subcommittees. The schools that would be losing funding would have other funding streams too, right? So that's something that's important to keep in mind.
Go ahead, Julie.
I want to reinforce that. I think there is a natural reshuffling of some of this too, especially with those triple funded schools, right? I think there are schools that just have an abundance. And I think this is really smart, but I also think it's very forward thinking to acknowledge some of the trends that are just beginning to emerge and really paving the way for those to be utilized more effectively. And Laura, I just also echo the brilliance of this presentation, your ability to demystify this and walk us through the entire arc of this is, hands down, just incredible. So thank you. And Callista and Oliver, your stories are just really moving, and I appreciate you sharing them with us today.
Thank you so much. I do ask a question. Is there a motion on the floor or going to be a motion on the floor to support this bill with the legislature?
I move.
We have a motion from Tony. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposition? Anyone recusing themselves? So we have a motion to support this bill with the entirety of the before and after school advisory, which in the past, what we have done is we've crafted a letter to send to the legislature to say that we know the bill is going to change, so we all recognize that. But at this moment, we support the intent of this bill to encourage us to ensure that we have adequate funding for our high school programs, that we do have I think you called it an ad hoc committee. Is that or advisory committee? Work group, sorry. It's every county, every state has a different word, and you have to make sure you use the right one. Otherwise, there's a lot of restrictions. But to have a work group to continue to look at the funding, as well as some of the data collection and those kinds of things. So we have a motion and it passes unanimously. So thank you very much for all of you being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And just want to again thank the chair and all the committee members for really your longstanding support on this issue. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So we have opportunity for emerging issues. We have in the past talked a little bit about immigration. We've talked about the fires in LA and what that impacted with both the school day and the after school time. So is there anything anyone would like to bring up that we can talk about for an emerging issue? I do have on our next meeting agenda a note for Josh about our reductions by region, so we can look at those and look at that data a little bit more closely as we looked at the unspent and kind of overlay it with the reductions. Chris?
Yeah, just some conversations that were sparked today just had me thinking about quality, and Diane brought up special needs and how that continues to be an area that we really want to be bringing quality to those families and to those communities. And CalPads was also brought up that quality attendance is really going to be required of all of our programs. And it's really our time to shine with using CalPads. But I just think in my role as someone who provides technical assistance in my region, we haven't really revisited totally maybe like a quality assessment tool that we could really utilize to support all programs, small size, medium size, and large, to really address how is your program doing supporting special needs families? How is your program feeling that they're achieving all the requirements for attendance? I think that is a big need of our field and has been lifted a couple of times that we've been meeting with site coordinators who are new, but also site coordinators who are in their 3rd to 5th year working. So any work around that or any also needs that you're seeing that in your communities, that was just one I wanted to lift today.
Well, Chris, we could, and Josh or Tiffany jump in, but, I'm thinking of Kit, in our region where they do a lot of special ed training for districts, teaching how do we include students, how do we look at what their IEP say, making sure we're meeting those. But Tiffany, you might have other organizations that we might want to invite to come and talk about what does it mean to engage with our special ed population and how to ensure that we're meeting all of their needs and their families' needs.
We do have a team member that he's been really trying to dig into this. And there was a conference that he just went to down in San Diego. So we'll see if we can pull some people that are willing to make the journey. And I'm sure there's some regional local ones as well that we could use to highlight. And I think Jeff, I'm saying this on the record, and we'll also bring a draft of CAN's assessment tool to the committee for some input, because it's coming close to being ready. So that's
okay,
official.
So I think, thank you, Tiffany. I think I'll work with Jeff and Tiffany. We'll look at bringing a presentation forward at our August meeting, focusing on special ed and making sure that they have both the inclusion, but the active participation and the needs being met. So thank you, Chris and Diane. Other emerging issues, Julie?
I think it's been mentioned before, but I just want to highlight in the state of California, we are not alone in this insurability crisis, and the rates of insurance in K-12 is struggling with this, as well as CBOs. I just want to put it again kind of on our radar because this is eating a lot of resources for dollars that are really mandated for a particular purpose. I know it's a much bigger conversation, but I think it's important that we continue to keep it front and center for both LEAs and CBOs. The rates of insurance and then the insurability is just really causing a lot of strain on resources. So I just want to mention that. And then I also, this is an odd one to bring up, but I'm noticing out of state vendors coming in, at least in Southern California, as new providers in ELOP, and responding to RFPs with rates of program that are well below a daily rate. It's a little bit buyer beware, because I think that I just really am concerned about some of those abilities to meet the compliance requirements of California. And it's just a little concerning trend that I want to bring up, because I think everyone here in this room knows what it does cost to be able to comply with these kinds of programs. Just seeing that, and just wanted to kind of name it because it's a little bit concerning in the kind of larger ecosystem.
Thank you. It's interesting on the juvenile justice side, we were seeing the same thing, that for-profits were coming in saying, oh, we could do this for cheaper, we can run this program. And every county, as you know, on the justice funding side of the house from the state has to have a juvenile justice coordinating council. And locally, our juvenile justice coordinating council just reiterated it with a vote to say that it has to be local providers, nonprofits, government partners, because we found it easy for these huge for-profit companies that were paying their staff so low, but had such a large footprint to be able to come in with a cookie cutter program that might not meet the needs of the families, because they didn't know those needs of the families. And so we actually locally voted and said, we want to reiterate that our our priority and our only way to use those state funding is to work with our government partners and our nonprofits, which we're hoping would then, so they couldn't even apply for the RFP if they didn't meet those requirements.
And I understand, right? Schools are in the midst of huge budget crises, so that can be, really an appealing strategy, but long term. So thank you, Sandra. Yeah, that's a great parallel.
Other emerging issues? I want to thank everyone for their time. I want to thank Oliver and the team for presenting today. Thank you to Emily and Kendra for being our behind the scenes support network, making sure everything works, making sure our IT and all of our stuff is here. I did mention at our next August 18th state advisory meeting, we will be looking at ELOP unspent, as well as the regional data for our unspent funds that we talked about today. And then we will also have with CAN a separate presentation than the CAN presentation, but something focusing on our special ed and how to meet those, and then through the assessment with CAN. Josh, do I have any more public comment or any questions that have come up? For public comment, you do have 2 minutes. You just state your name. You can unmute yourself, state your name, and speak to the full committee. You can raise your hand. It's a feature in Zoom.
Yeah, we have.
Trying to read the slide from a distance, Josh. I can't read the whole
all right,
thing. Sorry.
Hold on a second. I'm trying to, hold on. There we go. We do have a public comment. We have Shamia Sandal, so I'm going to allow her to talk. And again, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead, Shamia.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, good early afternoon. Thank you for taking my comment. I'm Shamia Sandals with the Alameda County Office of Education, and I'm part of the SSEL, the System of Support for Expanded Learning in Region 4. And I just want to express my appreciation to the issue or emergent concern raised by Chris Mesa about the tools that we have for quality and expanded learning. I talked to many principals and school administrators, and their understanding of what should be happening in expanded learning spaces is limited without an assessment tool, because that is the language they speak in the instructional day. And I really want to work to meet them where they are. And so hearing that CAN will be presenting the quality assessment tool at the next meeting, I am really looking forward to that, and I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your input.
We have another hand up for public comment. I will allow this person to talk. The name is, let me pronounce it correctly, Noni Galloway. So Noni, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Josh. Yes, this is my first time here at this meeting. I wanted to say thank you for the presentation in regards to Cal. That was very interesting to know. But I am here just because kind of want to represent parents in Northern California. I'm here in Oakland, California, regarding UPK. I did ask my question to Josh already, but I just wanted to see if there was any conversation regarding ELOP, LEAs working with childcare providers that are not contracted with the schools. So there is more of a parent choice when parents are looking for before and after school care for their children that are 3 and 4 years old. I know that I'm working on a committee out here in Alameda County where we're really trying to make sure parent voice and parent choice is top of mind with the LEAs when they are looking at contracting with after school programs. And I know that there are a lot of parents who want to have more options with that. And so I wanted to just lift that up, and then also to see if there's anyone in the room that can guide me or guide us in how contracting works when LEAs have to contract with after school programs.
I do not have an answer for you. I apologize. Josh, any comments from you? Is there any
I-
FAQ
yeah.
that we can direct to?
I don't have an answer directly. I did refer her to reach out to her education programs consultant to at least start the initial conversation.
Thank you.
Okay,
for your
thank you. You're welcome.
Any
Is
other
there any-
comments, Josh?
Yeah, any other public comments? Again, feel free to raise your hand if you would like to say anything. And we do have another comment from Laura DeMarie. I will allow you to talk right now.
Hi, thank you. Laura DeMarie, Santa Clara County.
That was so crazy.
I
They
work
didn't
for the
have
Oak Grove
another
School
answer
District,
for
and
me.
I'm also on the local child care provider council, the LPC in our area. And this issue of family child care providers being impacted by UPK, by the expansion of TK and ELOP has, greatly affected their enrollment. What I do in my district to work with our family childcare providers in our area is on our website, I include information at the very bottom, at the bottom of our ELOP page stating if, your family needs help or resources finding childcare, I direct them to our Santa Clara County Office of Education, our resource and referral, which, is our main provider of information for all things, childcare related. And then to answer the question regarding contracting with the district, we go through a request for proposals process. So anytime folks want to apply for, being a contracted provider of our after school programs, we make sure that they're in alignment with, the program guide, the quality standards, and meets all the needs and criterias for, what the state requires. So I think I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. Josh, any other public comment?
No other public comments right now, but we'll see if anyone wants to raise their hand. If they do, I'm not seeing any hands up. Sandy?
Thank you very much. So I am going to adjourn this meeting. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, those who are in person and those who are virtual. Our next meeting will be August 18th. So thank you very much and safe drive home in the rain. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stop the recording.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.